Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Salesforce Ben webinar, this time with language.io. And today we've got a slightly different topic, which actually I'm very excited to speak to you about, usually from our kind of, Salesforce dominated content. But this is going to be the ultimate guide to AI tooling, build, buy, or best of breed. And I think this webinar has come at a really good time because we're kind of going to be talking through, what's happened with AI, the kind of hype cycles, as well as now plateauing a bit to maturing and actually seeing some success and ROI with AI. So no matter where you are in your journey, we're going to talk you through what you need to know. So yeah, let's get started. So if you haven't heard of Salesforce Ben before, we are one of the leading media companies in the Salesforce ecosystem. So we have our website, our newsletter, which keeps you up to date with everything going on. We've got our events, our webinars like this one, but also our physical events in the US and the UK and Europe, YouTube channel and podcast as well. And we've just released a new version of our podcast, so check that out as well. And just to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Ben McCarthy. I'm founder of Salesforce Ben, and I will be your host today. And I am joined by Chris and Christian.
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
great
guys.
to meet you. Thanks for the introduction, Ben. Yes, I'm Chris. I lead the solutions organization for Language.io, and I'm excited to talk to you about some considerations as you're evaluating build versus buy decisions in your technology stack. I'm joined here with Christian Trader, who's also a Language.io customer. Christian, if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself.
Nice to meet everyone virtually. Like you said, my name is Christian. I lead our tooling team here for Checkr operations, and I'm really excited to share my experience actually making a real life decision around build versus buy with Language.io.
Fantastic. Good. So I'll go over the agenda here quickly, and then I wanted to kick it over to Ben to provide some insight as far as what he's seeing out there, what the team is seeing out there in terms of the Salesforce ecosystem. Our goal today is to help you understand a couple of key considerations as you are evaluating new technologies to include in your stack, right? Obviously, if everybody's watching the news, right? You see how much is happening in the AI space every single day. There are new decisions that it feels like you're needing to make by the hour, right? And I'm sure, getting a lot of questions from your leadership, from the organization around how are we going to modernize our technology? How are we going to take advantage of the new items that AI can enable for us? So what we wanted to do is talk to you about a framework that you can use when you're evaluating those decisions. Obviously, with AI, there's a lot of new capabilities that are enabled. You're able to build more, test more, but really, I think one of the key considerations is still build versus buy, right? And as you're making that build versus buy decision, we wanted to talk through these topics that are on the slide today for you to consider. Just overall, where are we? What's the state of AI in the Salesforce landscape today? What are the tools that you can be evaluating? What are the three paths that you can consider in a build versus buy decision, or using a native tool that's baked into the platform? Then we also want Christian to jump in and talk through the decisions that Christian was making, right? They very recently went through a lot of these same considerations on their end. We thought it might be useful for you to hear a story from Christian around those considerations. And then lastly, we'll go over a quick demo from Language.io just to show you how our technology fits into that landscape and is able to help you with a very specific use case that we think can help modernize your support ecosystem using the Salesforce Service Cloud components. So I'll toss it over to Ben quickly just to give a quick intro here and to go through a few slides just around the general state of the Salesforce AI solutions and the landscape that we're looking at today. So Ben, I'll move to the next slide if you want to just jump in and talk through a couple of slides briefly before I jump back.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chris. So at the we're just going to go through kind of how things have changed from hype to actually measurable value and what's changed in the past 3 or 4 years. Quick look at the Salesforce AI stack as it stands today, and then also go over enterprise realities to plan for. So AI has been an interesting one, right? I mean, we're just over 3 years, is it, or 4 years since ChatGPT was released, and it was like the Wild West back then. Like as soon as ChatGPT came out, you had people selling prompt engineering courses and telling you to buy this and buy that, and you're going to get left behind if you don't. But of course, that was the hype, and although we are still seeing hype around, it's kind of a lot more measured. We've seen the reports around 90%, 95% of Gen AI projects failing, people not seeing ROI from it. Actually, it takes longer to do stuff with AI and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's kind of, skewing the narrative a bit, because it's very easy to go all in on the brand new technology and lose a lot of money. But, if you speak to technologists and people actually using this technology, AI is here to stay. And the fact that companies have lost loads of money on experimental Gen AI projects, but are still pursuing AI because they've seen the value and they've seen the power of it. So I think we've been in that stage for kind of a while now, but it is accelerating. And something kind of a personal story from this, this conversation is, I've been using ChatGPT basically since I started. It was released, but I've recently switched to Claude, and I've recently started exploring different AI toolings, and they are so much better for certain things. So it's not that good to get kind of stuck down one path. There's a huge landscape out there, and this is what companies are currently exploring in terms of where to put their budget, as well as how to get ROI out of it this time.
Yeah, I think we had a quick poll that we wanted to just share around some questions we wanted to provide to help see where everyone else is in their current journey. So, Miriam, go ahead. Or if we want to talk through this poll, we have a quick poll that we're sharing on the screen. So, where would you say your organization is today in its AI journey? We've got a couple of responses up here. We'll give a few seconds for everyone to get their options selected.
Started off very skewed, but getting a bit more balance now. I can tell you from webinars in the past, when we asked this question, it looked a hell of a lot different.
I was
barely
thinking the
any
same
people
thing.
running AI in production.
Yeah, exactly. It's skewed much more to the top half of this chart, definitely, than what I've seen in the past. Yeah, and just as the results are coming in here, I think we can start to see these as they're coming through live. And what it sounds like is that many of you are running workloads that are already in production, or you're very far down the pathway of evaluating some of these options, right? So it sounds like you're used to some of these decisions that you're needing to make. You've already gone through some evaluation cycles, and you're in the process of either maintaining a system that you've deployed, or you're in the process of evaluating new systems. So hopefully today's conversation will help give you some additional ideas and frameworks. I'm sure you've had your own learnings as far as your own successes and issues you've run into when deploying these solutions. Hopefully the session helps give you some additional perspective on how to approach future decisions as well. Good. I'll go back to sharing my screen. And then Ben has just a few more slides here, and then we'll jump into more details of the conversation. So go ahead, Ben.
Great. Thank you very much. So Salesforce has been an AI pioneer for quite a while. If anyone remembers, back in, I think it was 2016, they acquired like 10 to 20 companies, something like that, in AI, and then Einstein was born after that. So they have been doing AI for a while, but they have really gone all in on agents. Mark Benioff declared before 2024's Dreamforce that they were hard pivoting to agents, and you can really see that in the messaging, the renaming of every product name to include Agentforce before it. So Agentforce is Salesforce's flagship product now, and it's growing very quick, and it gives you a very kind of declarative way to build out agents, but also connect to a lot of different models in the background. Alongside Agentforce, you have Data Cloud, which has been another one of Salesforce's flagship products for quite a few years now, that unifies all your data, kind of goes beyond just a CRM to have actionable data that the AI can actually use, including fuzzy data, documents, and emails and things like that. So Salesforce kind of have this ecosystem which includes everything you need. Integration fabric as well. You've got like MuleSoft, and Data Cloud includes a lot of integration, the ability to integrate into other systems. But although Salesforce and people that have been in the industry a long time, although Salesforce say they are the only platform that you need, quite often, that won't be totally true. Salesforce has a lot of what you need, but the app exchange, for example, exists for a reason, right? It's because Salesforce can't satisfy all of those use cases that go, down into niche industries or specific use cases. So I think it's a shame to kind of, Salesforce is a great platform, and I'm not saying anything different, but it's a shame not to look a bit broader in terms of tools that are out there to support you with different use cases. And then, as it says down there, strengths versus limitations. Salesforce has a lot of strengths. It's the market leader for a reason, but it does have its limits, and there are certain areas where you might want to explore further. And just to cover off this slide, so I think this slide, when I saw it, kind of made me think of a lot of the conversations around the SaaS apocalypse that I'm sure everyone's seen over the past 3 or 4 months, where the stock market has been pretty spooked with the release of some of Claude's new functionality that integrates into Excel. That AI is really here, and it's going to make a measurable dent in the SaaS market, in Salesforce's market share, and many other tools. But I think it was summed up quite nicely in a tweet that said an enterprise software company isn't going to hand over the keys to a 13-year-old that's vibe coded the CRM. Initially it does sound scary. You can now vibe code Salesforce, but Salesforce has 25 years of getting it wrong and building a system that enterprises want to have. And there's a lot of things in here that a CRM or any product needs to include: security and compliance, governance and control, quality assurance. And products like Salesforce have this, which is why they are not going anywhere. So yeah, an important point to factor in when you are looking at tooling, especially with AI.
Yeah. Fully agree. I think the way that I look at it is, there's been a lot of times that a lot of these platforms essentially have put their hands on the stove, right, and got them burned. And so there's no need for everybody to get burned again. Obviously, the landscape is shifting every single day, right? There's new tools coming out, new capabilities, new processes, new ways of thinking that are shifting the entire landscape. But fundamentally, at its core, right, when it comes down to a decision of whether you should use a native built-in solution or buy another third-party solution, there's a decision that's in front of you, right? You have to choose one of those 3 distinct paths, and as you're going down that process, we wanted to walk you through some of the thoughts that you might want to have as far as the evaluation criteria you might want to put in place when you're considering, is this a solution that we can build ourselves, and if we can build it, should we, right? And as far as that answer of whether you should or should not build a solution, we can help you understand some balances and trade-offs you might want to make in architecture and other areas as well. So I'll pause here actually because we had a quick poll that we wanted to share as well that I will also put up on the screen before we move off to the next section. So why don't we share this poll just to get some feedback from the audience again. So we wanted to ask you a question directly around translation or other use cases that you're having that might involve multilingual support use cases. So this is just around language I/O that we wanted to ask this question, of course, and to understand more context around where everyone on this line is. How are you currently, sorry, let's see, we have this, the question was changed here. So when it comes to using AI tooling for customer support, which path are you currently leaning towards when you're considering build versus buy or using a native solution? So we'll pause here for a moment, let everyone get the responses in again, and then we'll talk through it briefly before we go on to the next section. Yeah, this one's interesting to me, seeing everything come through, right? I think when generative AI, to Ben's point, when ChatGPT was first released a few years ago, I remember customer support, as we all know, is one of the key areas that everyone pointed to of saying this technology will revolutionize these support processes, right? And of course it has, there's a number of technologies going on, but what I'm seeing as well here is that there's a number of areas that many of you are still evaluating ways to incorporate this technology into your customer support workflows. Many of you are using the technology, which is fantastic to hear. But hopefully what today will do is show you some decisions and criteria that you may want to consider when you're evaluating new solutions that fit into your support workflows and your stack. So Thank you everyone for the feedback. That's really great to see. Let me share my screen one more time and we will continue moving forward here. So I will go over a couple of items just to start with here, and then after we go through a couple of the high-level considerations, I'll toss it to Christian. So what we wanted to talk through in this section is the viable paths inside of Salesforce that you might want to take in order to start incorporating some of this technology, right? I think many of you, what I saw in that poll question, are using a crawl, walk, run approach for some of these items. Obviously, there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of tooling, a lot of figuring things out that we're going to look towards here. What we wanted to explore with you some of the ways you can use some of the technologies perhaps to begin testing, but also understand the limitations of those technologies and to understand when you might want to bring in another evaluation tool, another tool into that evaluation process. So we also wanted to walk through a couple of ideas around how to compare fairly between those solutions using a scorecard. One of the biggest items here is that, as Ben mentioned, a lot of these tools are very capable in some areas, less capable in others. What's the framework that you want to use for scoring those to evaluate the capabilities and ensure that you're keeping a consistent rubric between each tool that you're evaluating? And really using that comparison framework to decide when does it make sense to go beyond built-in capabilities or to go beyond the capabilities of a base engine or a base solution. So we'll talk through all that in a couple of details here, a couple of slides. So, and obviously, I think where most people on this call are starting when it comes to the evaluation of these AI tool sets, right? Knowing that you're in the Salesforce ecosystem, Salesforce has built out a very robust suite of tools for these agentic AI solutions. I think where most people start is with the Salesforce native toolkit that's already made available to you. So option one is, if you're evaluating any sort of AI tool or platform, you're going to be looking at the options that Salesforce already has out of the box. So there's a lot of strengths to that, right? There's a very low implementation cost. These are items that are already integrated into the Salesforce processes. There's interfaces built. There's both user interfaces and data interfaces to be able to collect data from locations and use them, these agentic AI routines, which can really simplify the setup process and really make it fast for you to deploy these. So what that means is that these can be very, very quick to at least get a proof of concept up and running and also potentially to move to production. So it makes it very fast to deploy. The considerations that you should keep in mind when you're looking at these solutions is what are the boundaries of the capabilities, right? Salesforce is a very broad platform that offers a ton of functionality. And what you'll see is that there are a number of items that Salesforce has created that are jumping off points to explore how a technology might fit into your workflow, but then moving deeper into that workflow, you might identify limitations that Salesforce may not have on their roadmap to go and address. That's obviously where the marketplace comes in, and you would be able to lean on other vendors to help fill in some of the gaps that the native Salesforce solution doesn't quite address, right? Things to consider there, right? Depth as far as specialized use cases or capabilities to adapt to specific requirements. Breadth as well, right? If there's a particular solution that may apply just to the support channel on digital channels, for example, what happens when you want to apply that to a voice channel as well? Is there another solution that's either available or on the roadmap that could help you with that use case? Or fine-grained QA workflows that are needed by global enterprises as you're considering ways to improve quality of any of these solutions over time. The second option is to build it yourself. And we're hearing a lot of customers exploring this option. Ben brought this up in this terms of the SaaSpocalypse, as it's been called, right? And obviously with these new tools that are available through generative AI, this is now becoming more and more of an option in certain use cases. So we do hear customers evaluating this solution. We do hear users in the Salesforce ecosystem saying, could we build this ourselves and take ownership of that utility that we're trying to build, this process that we're creating inside of our support workflows? So there are advantages to that, of course, like any solution. You have ultimate flexibility, right? This is something you can build yourself to your own use cases. I think that's where a lot of the desire comes from when we're hearing about this idea of building your own versions of tools, right? You hear people taking it to the extremes, saying we're gonna vibe code Salesforce, right? And you would have, in theory, a custom built CRM that's tailored to your specific use cases if that were to happen. You also keep your IP, right? You keep processing logic. You own all those items. It makes it very easy for you to change it down the line here. If you need to make specific edits, you're not reliant on another vendor's roadmap to be able to do that. And in theory, it can lead to greater cost efficiency if you own more of the infrastructure and the architecture, right? These are things that you can, own some of that cost structure and help to optimize it for your specific workflows. So that's, I think, a lot of the future state that a lot of organizations are looking to when they're considering these options. They look at these advantages components. There are cons and risks that need to be considered, of course, as well, right? The biggest one is obviously maintenance cost. That's an item that I think usually gets overlooked sometimes when we see these new tools come out. We see new generative AI solutions. Everyone starts vibe coding, and we're able to get proof of concepts up and running very quickly. There's then a discussion that should happen around what happens at scale when something breaks, when we're loading 1,000 users into this product, when we need to have teams that are going to be maintaining access controls and authentication and data governance, right? These are items that are going to be more difficult to manage at scale than the initial proof of concept that you might be working with or considering. For the IP control rate as well, this is something that you need to think through. Again, it's easy to build pipelines, but have you considered all of the governance access and all of the, the data regulations that you need to adhere to, right? Have you considered all the security implementation that's required in order to make sure that there's strict boundaries around data access? So there's a lot of architecture and a framework that needs to be built around these tools in order to make sure that they remain compliant as you continue to deploy them at scale. And then as far as the cost efficiency, right, you can achieve cost efficiency, right, but it can also be difficult to achieve full cost efficiency. Sometimes you might have full visibility into some of the cost items that can happen down the line here. So now for option 3, right, this is where a vendor like Language.io would sit, is this best of breed solution that would sit inside of your Salesforce instance, right? These are vendors that have integrated directly within the Salesforce marketplace and provide solutions that are tailored to particular AI workflows that you're looking to deploy, solving specific pain points that you're looking to address within your support operations or other areas that you are looking to target. The advantages of these solutions are, of course, that the value proposition is built specifically for the use case at hand, right? This is something where we are, Language.io and other vendors that you're evaluating, the reason that they're in business is to solve the problem that you are facing, right? And that comes along with a lot of benefits, right? We have these vendors, we have these deep package integrations that feel native inside of the solution. These vendors have spent a lot of time making sure that the interfaces are well tailored for the environments that your teams are operating in, that they are essentially plug and play and feel almost like they are native in a lot of ways, right? Expanding on the Salesforce interface, making it so that it's very easily integrated into the processes that your team is running. As well, there's common triggers that you'll find that your team might hit the limits of a solution that you've put in place, right? So maybe you do start off using one of the built-in or the native solutions that Salesforce offers, or you built something yourself, and then you start hitting limitations that you didn't realize you were going to hit before, right? That's where searching out and finding vendors that have built custom tailored workflows, that have thought perhaps more expansively about the scope of the problem than you might have thought about if you were building something yourself, or a particular built-in feature in Salesforce may be able to address. That's where these specialized vendors come into play, that we're able to help fill in the gaps of those solutions, right? And lastly, really the reason I think to really look at these items is to consider the true outcome that you're looking towards. Obviously, with things like built-in solutions, building your own version via agentic AI tools or LLM technology, those can move very quickly to get an initial version up and running, right? And you can see the code deployed very quickly. You can see the solution put into production very fast. But when you think about the true time to value of when is the problem solved, right? When do you actually deploy the solution and you start to see measurable impacts in a support consideration around improvements in CSAT scores or reductions in handling time? That's where some of these third-party vendors like Language.io and others can come into play, where we've built businesses around these use cases that are able to, address those pain points and make sure that you are achieving the business objectives rather than just looking at the code and the interface that's been created. So something to think about and consider as you're evaluating these options. One of the key things to avoid as you're considering this is, obviously you can blend between each one of these items. You could have some items that are handled by Salesforce native, some that are third-party LLMs that you've integrated your own process, some that are third-party vendors, right? One thing that you want to think about is how do you avoid what we refer to as the Frankenstack here, right? Where you can imagine having multiple different vendors that are all targeted towards sort of the same item, or perhaps they're blending between one another. One thing that you should really consider as you're evaluating these decisions is making sure that you set a core set of architectural principles, right? What are the things that you're really trying to address? And how do you make sure that you are limiting the number of vendors or tools that are inside of that process so that you can make sure that there's not crosstalk or multiple management structures that need to be built around these items. You don't want to create technical debt just because it felt easy to piece things together. I think setting those architectural principles up front as you're making these decisions is critical to ensure that you don't end up accidentally biting off more than you can chew. Also, as you're building these items, you want to make sure that you're standardizing them and building observability layers across the entire stack, right? We want to make sure from your perspective that you don't have too many different tools you need to be looking at of, system one has this dashboard over here, system two has another. That can be very difficult to then conduct the evaluations and understand how the systems are improving your overall core business metrics. And lastly, as you're thinking about the integration strategy, make sure that you're reviewing what's available on the App Exchange and really thinking through, is there a partner or a vendor that I could reach out to that solved this problem before? I think you'll hear a little bit about that from Christian around some of the evaluations that they did and the thought process that went through, the search that they did when they were solving for the problem of translation solutions in their support stack. So I'm eager to get to Christian's commentary here. So what we'll do is we'll walk through a quick review of what Christian from Checkr went through when he was evaluating these different solutions. Just for context, for those that are interested in this question here, Language IO provides translation services for you to expand your support operations and allow any agent to speak any language, essentially. So when Checkr was making the evaluation of how do we provide this multilingual support at scale, they approached Language IO and wanted to give Christian a chance to describe to you those evaluation criteria that he and the team used when looking to answer that question. So Christian, I will toss it over to you and we'll go through a couple slides here.
Awesome. Thanks for the tee up. Yeah, so just to set the stage a little bit about Checkr operations and the problem which we were solving, which will be very connected to the build versus buy, obviously. We think about support in two distinct ways. We have support for our customers and support for candidates. Customers are the people who are buying screenings. And if you're not familiar with Checkr, we're a background check provider and background check services. So customers for us, they buy these services, and then candidates are the people who are actually getting screened. And for us, about 10 to 15% of our total support was non-English. And for them, these candidates who were reaching out to us, it was a less than ideal experience, frankly. There are two serious problems that we were trying to solve. The first one had to do with the idea of transfers. So we had a really less than ideal candidate journey. You would reach out, you may get to an English speaker who is in a different channel. They would change channels on you, and perhaps it'd go from email to chat, chat to email. And it could ultimately lead to a queue change as well. So in other words, it was a really long journey just to get this bilingual support contact or this non-English support contact to the human who could actually solve it. And then when it did get to that human with this long resolution time or less than ideal resolution time, it was also going to more expensive support, frankly. For anybody who's like deeply in the operations space, and I'm sure that's lots and lots of people on this call, non-English support is more expensive than English support, depending on the geo in which you're paying for it. So there was a cost consideration for us, but ultimately there was an experience consideration here that really mattered. And I think lastly, we knew this number is going to grow. This 10 to 15% is current state, but when we think about expansion or more international presence, we knew that we would have a problem today that was only going to get bigger if we didn't scale correctly. So we could go to the next slide and ultimately start thinking,
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, Christian, we kind of wanted, we had, I think, a quick poll question that we wanted to
apologies.
Walk everyone through. No, no worries, of course, yep. So we just wanted to walk everyone through a quick poll question here, just to expand on some of the things that Christian was just talking about here. So I'll let the poll go up on the screen here just to ask a question of everyone to see how aligned you are to this. Again, so Language IO and what we were working on with Checkr was specifically around the question of how do you handle multilingual support conversations at scale. So we were curious to get some feedback from everyone around how you're currently handling non-English support volume. And I already see the top item here of dedicated language queues or bilingual agents, solving a lot of that problem. And that's what we usually hear, right? For those that are solving the issue, we see that oftentimes the assumption is that you do need to use a native speaker perhaps to be able to handle that volume, that language. And I think that's a key item to talk through here, Christian, as we go through these slides.
Yep. I love that every poll's had a mix of answers too.
Yeah,
it's great to see the diversity here.
We do see a couple of people using machine translation or AI as well, so it sounds like you're familiar with this item, and hopefully we can show you a couple of items that Language IO can provide here as well to hopefully enhance that solution. But good. All right. Fantastic. I see, it seems like the responses are slowing down here. So yeah, it seems like many of you are either using some combination of machine translation technology or dedicated agents to solve that language problem. So, which is exactly, I think, what Christian was dealing with in those questions. So I'll toss it back to you, Christian, as I share my screen again for you to go through the rest of your slides.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep. So hitting on it, we ultimately had a build versus buy decision. We knew this is a problem worth solving. We looked at it through the lens of experience and cost, and there are really three paths forward, right? For us, it was a build with LLMs, and for us, from a more like in the weeds perspective, we were looking at a solution where we'd build with Creedle, that's like a AI company that we would partner with, and then use Gemini. And we did build a working prototype that was embedded in Salesforce, but ultimately we'll get into why that didn't work. We looked at Language IO, which, spoiler, that was where we ultimately made the decision. And then we looked at a few other vendors as well alongside Language IO, like AWS. Build was really tempting, and we'll get into that deeper, but obviously there is a cost consideration, then an ultimate governance and decision matrix that we started thinking about. So when we started thinking more deeply about how we get into an evaluation framework using a mixture of both internal expertise, and Ben, you called out using Claude. Claude's my best friend. We built a structured rubric with Claude. So plug for always using AI to make your life better. For us, though, we built a rubric around a few key things. The first one was core functionality and quality. Does it handle email and chat? And is it a high level of accuracy for sensitive communication? We talked through the lens and thought through the lens of cost and total cost of ownership. So not just license cost, right? That is, I think, where the immediate number can really be misleading. Sure, it might be a few $1,000s to get it off the ground. Running your LLM is really cheap if it's just calling the actual model itself. But that's the upfront cost, perhaps. But what it doesn't cover is total cost of ownership, which is maintenance, eng time, and ultimately, if something goes really wrong, that could also be a much larger problem. The other ways in which we were thinking about it were scalability and future proofing. Can it actually grow with their international footprint and keep pace? Integration and time to launch. How does it fit into Salesforce? But also, we use Zendesk for some of our teams too. And will it scale across systems? Is it a one-size-fits-all solution, or do we need to be bespoke across a number of different places? For us, and I said this before, we do background checks for many people. Security and data handling was something that was paramount to us. We could not have a less than secure solution in place, and knowing how our data is handled and how our data trains or does not train models was really important. And then lastly, do we have the team expertise and the team expertise to maintain this? It's easy to vibe code something and get something out the door, but a year from now, are you going to have the same staff and the same opinions that you do today that you can continue to make the same investment? You might have a quarter to build now, but will you have another quarter or weeks and days to maintain over the course of the year, especially as you continue to grow? So for us, the decision was pretty clear. We chose to buy. And that was for a few key reasons. One, we didn't want to be in the localization business. It's moving really, really quickly. We've talked a lot today about all of the things happening in the world of AI, SaaSpocalypse. Everything's fast right now. And we knew that we are not a localization business. So chasing that for quarters to come was something that wasn't interesting to me. And, there were more experts in the space that are chasing that. The second was quality is non-negotiable. For us, it can genuinely have legal implications if we get something wrong. If we would translate poorly and give the wrong message, or say something inconsistently, or use the wrong context, whatever, it's a really high risk. So quality was non-negotiable, and Language.io guarantees quality, especially for human-in-the-loop high-risk situations. And then also the math for us, again, we talk about this idea of build cost versus total cost. Sure, those numbers look drastically different, but when you factor in eng time, maintenance, and risk, decision was really, really clear for us that buy was also important. So for us, the final decision here and how it really solidified this buy perspective was a proof of concept. For me and for my team, it's really, really important for us to test the thing. And sure, everything sounds good on paper, but people would probably describe me as skeptical, just in my personal life and my professional life. So I like to be proven that something that we're going to do actually works. So for us, we set up a 4-week proof of concept to make a decision. And the results were very quickly overwhelmingly positive. So for us, there was like a few different ways that we started to look at this. The first one was, in order for this to be successful, we don't want any negative impact to CSAT is what we measure. We did not want any negative impact to CSAT. I didn't go into this, to be clear, expecting to provide a better experience. That's not the goal or the problem which I was solving. But I also wanted to create a guardrail that we couldn't provide a worse experience if we didn't have, native speakers providing the support. The second was translation quality. It had to be as good or better than what we're getting today. And for us, that meant accuracy was indistinguishable. An unexpected outcome and something that actually surprised our team was we reduced handle time through this pilot. That was not a measurable thing that we had in mind. This was a happy accident that, because the tool is good, because it works the way it was supposed to, having an English speaker use Language.io was actually faster than native speakers. And ultimately, we made this decision in the first 2 weeks of the pilot. Yes, we ran it for the 4 weeks, but we knew really, really quickly that this was an immediate purchase for us. The one call out that I will make, in case you're wondering from the idea of like transfers and why I didn't mention that here, as for the POC, I didn't redesign my queue architecture. I left the dedicated Spanish-speaking queue in place. That way, one, I had something to compare against for the pilot group versus the non-pilot group. And then two, I didn't want to make a structural change if I chose not to buy. So we made the assumption that transfers would not change. And ultimately, in the future, we would reduce that total transfer time because the queue was deprecated. So to talk a little bit about where we're at today, I would say we're still in this phase one area. We launched email to start. Email was the largest bucket of volume, and now all of my email agents for candidates are using Language.io. Adoption's been incredibly high, and that was really, really exciting to see. For people who work very closely with frontline teams, there's probably been times when you've piloted something or built something or bought something that maybe they're not keen on. Agents don't always like the thing that's in front of them. Whereas for this, we heard immediate feedback that this was easy to use and naturally fit into their existing workflow. Again, to the idea is it embedded directly on their screen that they're already spending their time on. yes, it works well. Single pane of glass, at least for me, is important, and it's working. When I think a little bit about how I continue to scale this, right, because we solved a problem today, but there are more things I want to do, we are going to move into a real-time channel. We started with email, which is, asynchronous, and now we're going to move into a synchronous channel with messaging. That's going to actually happen in the next few weeks, which is really exciting. We've never offered Spanish support in anything but email, and I think this will be a differentiator. So I'm really excited for that. And in the future, I'm going to solve more complex problems. The one that I would specifically call out is Bill 96. If anyone's in the support world and Quebec, then you've probably heard about the idea of Bill 96. And that is a legally required mandate that we have to have French first support. And getting a solution that upheld that bill was really, really critical. So talking about the ultimate results, we did end up solving the transfer problem. Of our addressable transfers, we reduced that number by 64%. This was a huge win. Again, hitting on this happy accident of handle time, we saved nearly 15 minutes a case, which again, for these Spanish cases, that's pretty meaningful. And if you're in the workforce planning phase, you know how much money and time 15 minutes back into every case is. And then again, this is 75 agents now versus the few that were staffing it in the past that are now empowered to handle a Spanish case that gets to them. So I would ultimately wrap this up in maybe 4 different ways of what you should know. I think the first question, especially for me, is, do I want to be in this business? Again, I didn't want to be in the localization business. That's not something that I consider myself an expert in, although I do spend a lot of time with the Language IO team, so maybe I believe I'm an expert. But do I want to be in this business? The second is total cost of ownership can often trump this license cost. Yes, you might be paying the seat cost. Yes, you might be paying this credit cost, whatever the usage cost, but that doesn't account for all of the things that go into it beyond day one. Maintenance is different. Risk is different. And opportunity cost is, something to really keep in mind. It's not always an easy decision to just build it because you can. Next, stakes also matter. A bad translation for us, again, wasn't just a bad experience, which was paramount to protect, but it also could have meant litigation for us. And that was a risk that I just was not willing to take. Accuracy was non-negotiable. And then lastly, again, to me being a skeptic, a POC proved this valuable. We did a free trial. We removed the ambiguity. We saw the data. It spoke for itself. And we made a decision quickly, 2 weeks into a 4-week pilot, when I've seen decisions drag on beyond a 30-day POC, was really, really promising and a really favorable outcome for my business. So I'll hand it back to Chris to show to show you in depth what Language IO actually looks like in use.
Yeah, well, thanks, Christian. Before we jump into that, though, I wanted to just say thank you again for giving that context. And I think, this is specific to Christian's Language IO evaluation. There's takeaways here, I think, for any product that you're evaluating, really, right? I really love the framework that Christian put around this of saying, okay, we can see the cost value, right? If you look at just the top line number of what's the dollars out in order to support our own build solution versus a buy solution, right? You saw that there was a pretty dramatic difference there. But when you actually brought it down, and when Christian and the team built out this really detailed evaluation criteria rubric and put it into production for them to observe how it handled and impacted their core support metrics, I think that was extremely revealing and something to consider as you're thinking through these options, right? Could you have put the $2,500 solution in place, Christian? Definitely, right? Would it have, I'm sure, caused additional failure points? Then you would have had to keep moving down the line here and addressing some of those quality considerations later on. Yes, right. It would have taken a lot more investment to move past that initial step here. My phrase that I always use, which I think can apply to other areas as well, is that right now, ultimately, machine translation is an easy thing to do, but a hard thing to do well. And I think Christian and the team did a really great job of identifying that early on and realizing that, anybody could write a routine that's going to go and call, and get a translation back. but is it the right translation? Is it going to actually solve the core problem that we're trying to answer of, can we have English speakers who are going to speak as natively as a Spanish speaker would, right? Are we going to be able to avoid compliance issues in terms of accuracy requirements? So I think it's a really fantastic framework that you can use for both this multilingual support evaluation you might be running, as well as any other AI tool that you're evaluating, right? Make sure that you're looking to the industry, that you're looking for experts that may have solved this problem before that can give you some guidance around how to approach those items. So thank you again, Christian. I'll go through a couple more slides here. We want to talk through some of the things you should think through and the ways that you should be evaluating this, and I'll show you how Language I/O can help get past some of those items, right? So with DIY builds, there are hidden risks that Christian just got to as he was talking through it, and we'll talk through them in a little bit more detail here. And many of you will start with your own DIY build. I think it's a great place to start experimenting and to see where things, initially, could apply, right? There's lots of experimentation going on right now around these new tools. But what we've seen and what recent MIT studies have shown is that internal builds tend to fail twice as often, right? They might work well in early testing, but then once you start considering these items that we list down at the bottom of the page here, that's where it leads to issues. There's drifts that may occur, right? The underlying model may change, or the prompt may drift away from what it was originally used. As the model gains more context, maybe the outputs drift away from what you were originally using them for, right? And it requires maintenance to make sure that the responses stay online. When it comes to the translation solution as well, right? There could be specific terminology that is sometimes difficult for large language models to enforce. They tend to be a little bit more creative in their responses. They might not be as strict in the terminology requirements. You don't want to rely on a single model for either translation or really any other use case that you're building on an LLM. We know that there's strengths and weaknesses of each individual model. From a translation perspective, one model may be really great at French, another model may be really great at Japanese, and you need to be able to make sure that you're mixing and matching and choosing the right tool for the problem at hand. And when it comes to just either a translation solution or any sort of AI solution you're evaluating, you need to consider whether you're actually building a governance layer or not, right? The proof of concept is easy to build out, but how do you make sure that data access controls are regulated appropriately? How do you make sure that there is, auditing and, trails that are in place to be able to observe what happened in that system? How do you make sure that when you scale it out, it doesn't suddenly fail because of rate limits that are applied or other issues that might happen in terms of the response time from the models that you're working with? And really, all of this adds up to what we call true cost blindness, right? You may not actually understand the full cost of ownership as you're jumping in and building out these proof of concepts. So as you're experimenting, just keep that in mind of really trying to evaluate what these solutions will look like at scale. So for Language I/O, I'll talk through quickly what it is that we offer and just how we end up solving some of those problems. What I'll show you is a really quick demo just of our solution. I'm going to compare it against actually the Salesforce native translation solution so you can see the differences that we're able to offer. What we provide is secure real-time translation that is enterprise-grade security with zero data retention, right? So when it comes to that governance question, making sure that you're applying these technologies in a way that's compatible with your security requirements, Language I/O is designed for translation and multilingual support to be able to handle those considerations out of the box, right? You don't need to think through the governance layer. We've done it for you. We have a multi-engine orchestration system that, to Christian's point here, Checkr was not a linguistic expertise, firm, right? There wasn't a lot of language experience inside of the organization. The team did not want to get into that. When you have a quality consideration, you need to think about who's your partner, who's going to help solve that quality consideration. So for translation, Language I/O has been doing this for years. We offer up the capability to, provide that recommendation on which engine is going to be best for a particular use case, as well as for glossary and terminology control. Right, if you have a specific translation that's not returning correctly because it's not interpreting the context of that translation, you need to think about having a partner who's going to help guide you around how you can use quality improvement tools to achieve the outcome that you need, right? Ultimately, without accuracy, it's going to be very difficult for you to solve the use cases and to see what Christian was able to demonstrate in terms of using these technologies to really solve the business problems at hand, right? And that's where Language IO comes in to offer those accuracy control elements. And lastly, we also offer other components beyond just our translation solution. We offer capabilities like toxicity controls that are able to help make sure that agents are shielded from content that may perhaps be harmful for them to see, to be able to mask profanity and other items. We're also able to provide technology that makes sure that if something is translated, right, that the translation goes out with the right level of control around it to make sure that the right terminology is getting presented back to the end customer. So there's a wide and expansive set of questions that come out from these translation solutions that we've been working with for over 10 years that we would like to show you just quickly how we're able to solve for some of them. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, so I'll do this demo really quickly. I'm actually going to show you a non-language IO solution first, just so you can see the differences in some translation solutions here. So on the right-hand side, I'm a Spanish-speaking customer. On the left-hand side, I'm an English-speaking support agent. And I'll show you some of the limitations of a single engine, non-optimized translation solution. This is using the default translation solution that's baked into the Salesforce messaging in-app and web component. And you can see that I've sent this through in Spanish. I'm going to click translate on this. This is a real example of some content that one of our customers shared with us around a gaming use case that has a lot of very difficult to translate terminology. So you'll notice if I type this in and I click translate, the translation comes back with, I ordered an engraved print of the heart of a mouse strategist goblin, and I received a window print of the gangrenous abomination. How can I catafixiate for the original card that I ordered? Now, like I said, single model solution, limited capabilities to control quality. If your support team is receiving this translation, you can imagine the impact that this will have on handling time, on CSAT scores, right? The agent is not really able to clearly understand what the customer is saying. So how's the agent going to solve the question? And you can imagine sending a response back. Many of these solutions can be pretty literal. And let's say you have a typo in there, right? Of, hi, thanks for you meant to say message, but the E and the A key are close to one another. You typed the wrong thing, right? When you send this back to the customer, sure, a translation goes back, right? It's easy to send a translation, but it's hard to get it right. Right. If you notice that translation there, the customer asked a question about a card that they ordered, and they received a response back about a spa day that they were booking, right? So if I'm a customer and an agent in this conversation, both of them are lost, and you can imagine the impact that this will have on core support metrics. What I'll do over here is I'll show you the distinction. I'll show you what Language IO is able to provide. And again, to the point earlier that was raised, how well these solutions are integrated into these workflows. What I did was I accepted the conversation here. Again, Spanish-speaking customer on the right-hand side, English-speaking agent on the left-hand side. When I initiated the conversation, we picked up on the language right away. This happened seamlessly. You'll notice how this space is created to be extremely similar to the use. This is our own application that we've built, our own managed package on the App Exchange. It's meant to be almost no retraining required for agents to learn how to use this system. What I'll do is I will put that same piece of text in here for you to see what this looks like with the additional translation capabilities around it. You'll notice that terminology is improved here, an engraved foil of the mouse heart goblin strategist, and I received a showcase foil of the canker abomination, the correct name for that character. How can I exchange for the original card that I ordered? You can immediately see how the improvement in translation quality by having a provider that's able to select multiple models, control for terminology, and improve the quality makes this a much more seamless conversation for users to have with one another. And let me just show you an example of what happens if you were to, let's say, be a little bit more casual, perhaps, in the response back. Let's say you have a support agent who hasn't gone through full training yet. They're speaking a little bit more casually, and they still have typos in there. We use other routines through language models, generative AI tools, to be able to do things like optimize the translation to make sure that it's going to provide the right level of quality back to the customer. So when I send this out, you'll notice that it understands the context of what we're trying to talk about here, and that it was able to shape that content in a way that was going to translate very well and also correct for common issues here, right? Where the agent didn't need to do anything, they didn't need to think about it. They're able to just follow along with their workflow and continue to support the customer. So quick example of how Language IO is seamlessly embedded into your Salesforce workflows, can provide these multilingual support conversations very easily to customers. And hopefully that gives you a quick rundown of what it is that we're able to do here. So lastly here, I wanted to wrap it up with just a couple of last thoughts before we toss it over to one other poll question, then some additional questions. The main questions that you should be asking are, does the native tool allow for glossary enforcement, right? If you're considering an evaluation solution, if so, how many language pairs can I actually support? Is it powered by the latest and greatest translation solutions, or is it using a legacy model? If it is being powered by an LLM solution, do I have the capability to optimize the translation output? If you have access to the prompt, can you create unique prompts per language pair, right? Is this something that you can adjust between French versus Japanese with very different considerations? You might want to present different formality and tone. Is the solution truly model agnostic? Does it allow you to pick and choose the best tool for any particular use case? And how are you auditing those translated communications for any regulatory review? Are you getting enough data into your system that you'd be able to understand the audit trail of how these conversations progress down the line? So I'll sum it up here before we go to one last poll question and go to Q&A, right? Some of the key takeaways we wanted to share as you're considering these build versus buy decisions, right? Many of these native solutions that you're working with, that you're seeing, they're great places to start, but you shouldn't stop there. If you run into quality considerations or limitations, that's where you can find vendors like Language.io. Keep searching for, best of breed solutions that will help solve the problems at hand, and make sure that you are considering the full universe of options rather than accepting quality limitations just based on the fact that it was built into the platform. If you are considering a build solution, you heard Christian mention this, only build if it's your own space, right? If it's IP that you want to own. If not, the total cost of ownership might surprise you. It might end up distracting you from some of your core operations. As you're evaluating these solutions, build really robust scorecards and don't just build them around one dimension of, say, translation quality. Use the framework that Christian shared of evaluating the business outcomes and the metrics by putting them as close to production as you can to make sure that you're understanding the impact that it will have when you actually deploy it into your organization. And lastly, when it comes down to it, I mentioned this before, I'll say it again, that translation specifically is something that requires depth. It's easy to do, but it's hard to do well, right? That's where a provider like Language.io comes in. It can help you solve that specific question. So we'll go to Q&A here, and I think we have one more poll question. So I will just see what we have here, and if we want to just put this up on the screen, Miriam, if we want to go through that last poll question, then we can open it up for any Q&A. So this question here is, we want to know, what's your biggest barrier to moving forward with any multilingual AI solution, right? As you're considering these options, what are some of the things that you think you'll run into, and what are the issues that you'll have to overcome in order to deploy a solution like this into your support workflow? Seems like the initial read here is that proving the ROI before you can invest, right? And hopefully that framework that Christian shared as far as ways that you can structure these quality evaluations and really understand the production impacts of these systems could be one that you could use. That's something, of course, you can reach out to Language.io at any time if we could help you structure that internally for you to also run that experiment yourself. We do this all the time with customers. We'd be happy to do the same with anyone else on this call. Good. Well, thank you for your responses. I think we'll go to the Q&A here. If there's any questions that have been asked here, I'll pull up the list here just for us to look through. We got a couple of questions here. I'll just run through them in order with how many that we can get to with the time left here. I see the highest voted question is, how is the model designed to remain economically viable at very high contact volumes, especially for phone calls? With several thousand contacts, credit usage seems to rise very quickly for use cases like phone live translation. Great question, right? This is something that obviously I think many users are finding that, when you build the POC, the cost looks simple, right? But then as you scale it out, there's other hidden costs on the back end. So Language.io, like we said, we work with multiple different vendors. We are able to build a cost structure that we're able to scale the credit usage, and give you discount volumes as you continue to move upward in that volume band. So we're able to work with you to find a way that you can help better predict that credit usage as well. We work with customers in a way that you would be able to build this into your budget and not be surprised by the credit utilization at the end of the day. So we'd be happy to walk through some of those items as well. I think Christian could probably tell you stories on that if we had more time here, but we'll save that for another day. And let's see, I see a question here that says Salesforce CEO stated that we with AI engineers are no longer needed. Salesforce AI is expensive and cost is a huge consideration. So what is the future of engineers in the Salesforce ecosystem? I could talk to this one perhaps with my thoughts. Ben, I don't know if you wanted to talk through this at all, if you wanted to perhaps take that one, given your perspective here. The question was from the third question of the Q&A list. SF CEO is the question here.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think it's as black and white as that. I mean, I interviewed Mark Benioff 2 years ago, I think, and he was saying, we're building Agentforce to be a Salesforce professional first product, so that Salesforce professionals can use it without a huge amount of AI experience. So, I don't think Salesforce professionals are going anywhere. Salesforce professionals with AI knowledge are going to be even more in demand. If you're talking about dedicated AI engineers or maybe Salesforce professionals which are slightly more AI leaning, I think it's 100% going to be a huge, massively in demand for those kind of roles, because the kind of solutions we're talking about on this call require not just Salesforce experience but wider AI knowledge and how everything fits together. So yeah, I would disagree with Salesforce's CEO.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of talk going on out there, and I think that there's a reality that we'll end up seeing that will look a little bit different from it, but that's our take on it here. So I just wanted to wrap up. I think see we're at time here, and I wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining. Really, we wanted to, hopefully this was useful for you today. There's a couple of resources here that you can see. We'll share these out after the fact to download the guide. You can explore the integration that Language AI can provide. And of course, as always, please reach out and book a demo. We'd be happy to show you more details around what we're able to talk through today. And we are looking forward to hearing from many of you. I really appreciate the time. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks all.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks everyone. Thanks Christian and Ben as well. Yeah, thanks everyone for your time. So
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.